At the end of it, I'm pleased to have received the backing of my colleagues in tonight's ballot. Whilst I'm grateful for that support, a significant number of colleagues did cast a vote against me, and I've listened to what they said. Following this ballot, we now need to get on with the job of delivering Brexit for the British people and building a better future for this country. A Brexit that delivers on the vote that people gave, that brings back control of our money, our borders and our laws, that protects jobs, security and the union, that brings the country back together rather than entrenching division. That must start here in Westminster, with politicians on all sides coming together and acting in the national interest. For my part, I've heard what the House of Commons said about the Northern Ireland backstop, and when I go to the European Council tomorrow, I will be seeking legal and political assurances that will assuage the concerns that members of Parliament have on that issue. But while delivering Brexit is important, we also need to focus on the other issues that people feel are vital to them, that matter to them today, the issues that we came into politics to deal with. Building a stronger economy, delivering first-class public services, building the homes that families need. We owe it to the people who put us here to put their priorities first. So here is our renewed mission: delivering the Brexit that people voted for, bringing the country back together, and building a country that truly works for everyone.
But can you get your Brexit deal through?
A very brief statement there from the British Prime Minister saying that she is pleased with the results of this vote and that she is going to carry on with delivering the Brexit that people voted for. Sir John Curtis is the president of the British Polling Council and a political scientist at the University of Strathclyde, and he rejoins me from Glasgow. So what did you make of what we just heard from the British Prime Minister?
Well, there was an acknowledgement at the beginning of her statement that indeed a rather large number of Conservative MPs, more than a third, had voted against her, and she said, "I've heard their concerns." She then went on to say that I am going to seek political, and I think perhaps the crucial word, legal reassurances from the European Union about the Brexit deal. One suspects that the message that Theresa May is going to give the European Union tomorrow is that, frankly, you may not want to reopen the deal, but I don't have any chance at all of getting this through the House of Commons, and that you are going to have to give me something quite substantial if I'm going to have any chance of getting it through. So I think probably tonight's vote, which has indeed resulted in a relatively large vote against the Prime Minister, although she's won it, means that the European Union now has a rather bigger headache than perhaps they imagined. No, the truth is, anybody who'd been listening to the House of Commons over the last 2 or 3 weeks will be aware that the House of Commons, at least, has given a fairly decided thumbs down to what has been negotiated in Brussels.
And sir, if you'll just hang on there, I want to bring in the CBC's Thomas Daigle into our special coverage of this vote. And Thomas, your reflections on what we heard from the British Prime Minister, and go ahead with a question for Sir John Curtis.
I didn't hear anything especially new other than that little bit right off the top when she acknowledged that there's a significant number of Tory MPs who voted against her here, but otherwise repeating most of the talking points that we've heard time and time again from Theresa May. But John Curtis, I put this question to you because anytime I go home to Canada, people ask me, number one, is there going to be another referendum on Brexit, whether leave or Remain is still on the ballot. Whether Remain is still going to be on the ballot or not is another question. But just on the second referendum itself, the results tonight, does that pave a way or remove the possibility of a people's vote, as people here call it?
I suspect it doesn't make a great deal of difference. Certainly the 117 people who voted against the Prime Minister were not voting because they wanted another referendum. Most of them will be voting because they want a harder Brexit than Theresa May has in mind. The answer to you is that if there were to be a vote tomorrow on a second referendum, it would not go through, because at the moment neither the UK government under Theresa May or the opposition under Jeremy Corbyn are in favour. It's only going to happen if one or other of them changes their mind. And the truth is, is that even if Jeremy Corbyn does change his mind and fall in favour of, we're not even sure then when it would go through. Not all Labour MPs would vote for it. And even if the DUP were to back it at the moment, they're saying they're against it, it may not go through. The paradox of all of this, in truth, is, of course, is that Theresa May has set her face absolutely determinedly against the second EU referendum. But at the moment, if you were to ask me which ballot would she be more likely to win with her deal, a ballot of MPs in the House of Commons or a ballot of the general public, I would say to you she's got more chance of winning a referendum vote for her deal than MPs. Now, that doesn't mean to say I think she's necessarily going to win. It will be a very tough fight, but I suspect she at least has a sporting chance. The polling evidence suggests that, maybe it's not that far short of 50% if it were to be in a ballot versus Remain. But at the moment, at least, she's set her face against. And the problem, I think, essentially now is that for her, at least, making such a twist is now perhaps made more difficult, given that she knows that those 117 MPs are not people who are wanting her to pivot and suddenly change her mind on a second referendum.
And Sir John Curtis, where do you, because so much of this has been focused on Theresa May and her political future, but the more important question, of course, I think, is the future of the United Kingdom in all of this. So where do you see the future of the country in the few months ahead?
Well, that's a fascinating question. The truth is we are living through a political crisis, and I doubt if this is going to be the last moment of crisis in the next 2 or 3 months. And the honest truth is we're not quite sure how this is going to play out. It looks as though the Prime Minister's attempt to come up with a compromise that would appeal both to Remainers and to Leavers is in the end going to fail because both sides say this is inadequate second best. That means the UK perhaps is facing a choice between a very hard Brexit, with leaving without very much in the way of a deal, or going for probably some kind of second EU referendum. If in the end MPs decide that that is the stark choice, it may be that at that moment we get the second EU referendum, but one suspects that we won't reach that point until perhaps late February, early March, i.e. very close to the deadline that the United Kingdom is facing.
And Thomas?
To jump in here, Theresa May heading to Brussels tomorrow for that EU summit to meet with other European leaders, and she has said that she's going to press them and tell them about the House of Commons concerns on the Northern Ireland backstop. And I put this question to John Curtis. In light of the results of this confidence vote, does this embolden her or weaken her in the eyes of EU leaders?
Well, it probably weakens her in their eyes in the sense that I think the European Union has been facing a question, frankly, for weeks or months. At the end of the day, if we strike a deal with this government, will this government be able to get it through? I think there have always been doubts about that. And I think there's always been a choice for the European Union of do they try to get a deal via Theresa May, or do they in the end accept that the UK government might indeed collapse and therefore everything goes up into the air with a general election. So to that extent, at least, their doubts about whether they're going to get something Theresa May will be reinforced. But on the other hand, I think certainly what they are going to be aware of is, in a sense, we do now have a very implacable division. On the one hand, the European Union is insistent that there needs to be some insurance policy that ensures that there doesn't have to be a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. But equally, the UK Parliament is saying that any arrangement that means that at the end of the day, our ability to leave the European Union in its entirety, including the customs union, that our ability to do that is anyway circumscribed, is too much of a constraint on our sovereignty. And at the moment, that these kind of two essential principles for the two sides are in clash with each other. And whether any compromise can be found, it perhaps is now the real challenge to the statecraft of both the European Commission and of the civil servants who have been supporting Theresa May during the course of this process on the British side.
And Sir John Curtis, we're getting reaction from where you are in Scotland. This is what the Scottish leader, Nicola Sturgeon, says. We now have a lame duck Prime Minister and are saddled with a lame duck Brexit deal. What do you make of that characterization?
Yeah, that is probably a perfectly reasonable characterisation. The only problem, as it were, the SNP and all the other opposition parties face is, however, at the moment at least, it's not a government that is likely to lose a confidence vote in the House of Commons. It is a paradox here. The more that Theresa May is in trouble in selling this deal, the less likelihood that she has in falling foul of vote of confidence in the House of Commons, because crucially the DUP, those 12 Northern Irish Unionists who are so insistent that they don't like the backstop and who are saying they would vote against the current deal, they're also saying, well, look, but for so long as the deal doesn't go through, we don't want the government to come down. Whereas, ironically, if she were to get the deal through, she might actually lose a vote of no confidence, because at that point, the DUP would vote against her. So she's caught on both sides. She struggles to get the deal through. That might enable her government to survive, but unable to get its policy through. If she were somehow to get the deal through, she might still be out on her ear anyway.
Wow. So, I mean, this is really quite a moment in all of this. And you would characterize it as a political crisis when people wake up tomorrow in Britain or as they're digesting all of this tonight. I mean, where does the country go next?
Well, I mean, the basic problem the country faces is that it has given notice that it wants to leave. It's going to leave the European Union on the 29th of March. It has legislated to say it's leaving on the 29th of March. And if it doesn't do anything about that, but cannot reach an agreement, it crashes out of the European Union. Now, that said, a court decision by the European Court of Justice earlier this week has certainly given us one way out. And that is, it's now clear that legally the United Kingdom could revoke its Article 50 notice if it wished to do so. But even to do that, Theresa May or whoever would have to get a vote through the House of Commons to say, look, we should revoke Article 50 and we're not actually leaving. But whether that indeed is where the end we end up, well, it doesn't know. The problem the country faces is now essentially it's got a government that is in office that cannot deliver its major policy, and it's a major policy that has a deadline on it, which is now little more than 3 months away. And that inevitably creates a political crisis, and it's not clear how it's going to be resolved.
Sir John Curtis, appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much for your insight. Sir John Curtis is the president of the British Polling Council.